Why do some companies stand out while others seem to merely show up? That's what we'll explore with leaders across multiple industries to hear how they're creating better experiences by design. And now your host, Susan Quinn.
Research shows that prospecting is not at the top of the list for many professionals, especially in service-based industries, where we're trained to deliver our expertise, not necessarily sell. We wait for referrals, or we hope the phone's going to ring, or we convince ourselves that one more networking event will magically solve everything. But what if business development didn't feel awkward or forced or painful? Today's guest, Tom Martin, built an entire playbook around what it takes to make prospecting more human, more strategic, and yes, actually painless. Coming from a marketing agency background, Tom's wisdom applies far beyond agencies. Whether you're leading a business or growing a practice, or simply trying to get more people to say yes, this conversation is packed with insight. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Tom, it is such a pleasure to welcome you today to Better Experiences by Design.
Wow, I can't thank you enough for inviting me to come along.
So I think you've been called the master, maybe even the sales whisperer when it comes to turning a conversation into a client. So every person who is going to listen to this broadcast today will be able to find something useful. How did you get to become the master of what it means to be an expert salesperson?
I did it the old-fashioned way. I just jumped in with both feet back in the 90s into business development. I was at an agency here in New Orleans, and I told the owner/president that I thought the way we did business development was bass-ackwards, and that it was not strategic, and that I thought there was a much, much better way we could do it, even though I'd never, ever done business development in my life, and I was all of maybe 30 years old. And he was crazy enough to like my thoughts and said, all right, well, half of your job is now business development for the agency. And so I just jumped in raw and started figuring it out, and I've been doing it ever since. And what I've done is, over the years, as you do things, things go well, and you keep those, you make mistakes, you figure out ways not to do that again. And it's built itself into a system that I call Painless Prospecting. And it's all based on science. And it's just been something that I've perfected over the years and continue to perfect, because the world changes every day and you've got to evolve with it.
So I know you've written a book, The Invisible Sale, and we can certainly talk about that. But you mentioned in your previous job with an agency that you thought the way BD was being handled was not the way. What was not the way? Can we start there?
You have an agency, you have agency experience, as I do. In so many agencies, business development is start stop. What would happen is we would pitch when we needed to pitch. We either found out we were about to get fired or something would go wrong. And it was like, oh, we got to go pitch. And so we'd ramp up and we'd find a new account, or maybe we would get invited to an RFP. We'd ramp a team, pitch, maybe we win, maybe we wouldn't. And that was it. It was just this start, stop, start, stop. It was very referral based. But more importantly, it's just not strategic, because when you're beating the bushes to hurry up and win a new piece of business to replace something you're about to lose, you don't have the luxury of being very particular, right? And if you're only pitching those people that invite you to their RFP process, again, you're not selecting who you're working with. There's no plan on how you're going to build a base of business or what you want your client roster to look like, etc. And that's not going to change unless we take an active role. Unless we start to say we want to be in charge of our future, we want to be in charge of who we work with 5 years, 10 years from now. If we don't lead, if we don't have a strategic pathway forward, then we're just going to be the product of whatever we happen to be able to win.
Well, you mentioned strategy, and if you don't have a strategic lens, then you are hanging out just with the hope strategy that you hope the right client is going to come your way, whomever that might be. When you think about strategy, you say a system is part of how you look at the sales process. Give us a sense of what that system even looks like.
For me, that system looks like identifying at a very, very highly detailed level who I want to work with. Not unlike you would develop if you're creating advertising or campaigns for a consumer based, traditional consumer, not just demographically or industry, but psychographically. What are their unique pain points that, for whatever reason, we can solve better than anybody else in the world? And then from that, how are we going to position ourselves so that when they run across us, whether it's us, our content, we call them, they see like, oh wow, these are the people for me. Or maybe not right this moment, but these are people I should keep an eye on because they think like I do. And then the third step is to figure out where are those people hanging out or looking for information to do a better job at whatever they do, right? Where are they looking for knowledge? And I call them propinquity points. And then how can we show up at those propinquity points so that we surround them, and that when it comes to whatever we do, we're either the only voice they hear around the subject matter, or we're one of the very loud voices that they hear around the subject matter. And that maybe I'm even bigger than I really am because, wow, I see this person everywhere. And it creates a very big impression. And, there's a lot of science behind it, but it's what leads people to want to pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, I have a problem I think you can help me solve. Let's chat.
So fill in the blank, whatever the business who's doing this. Let's say you have your strategy, you know who you are targeting, you're figuring out where they are hanging out. And in today's world, everyone says content is king. And so continue to populate that, be a thought leader. And how do you do that so that you're perceived as the authority and that people will choose you? Do you guide any of the businesses that you work with of establishing that position of authority?
Yeah, you can simply associate yourself with really good content, and that will, I've tested the theory, it will help position you as a thought leader or a topical expert. But to truly become the person that is the master, to use your word from the intro, of a subject, you have to be creating new, not just new content, you have to be creating new knowledge and
Mm.
putting new knowledge into the world. Knowledge that either just makes other people smarter or makes them stop and go, I need to think differently about this, or I should at least consider thinking differently because it'll open my mind up to new opportunities. The true thought leaders of the world, and I'm very particular about that word. Thought leadership is not about thought, it's about leadership. It's about saying, here's something new. And that pushes people out of their normal zone. And that is, I believe, what makes you a thought leader. That's what makes you an expert, because people want that person who can bring new ideas and new knowledge into the world, because that person's further ahead than they are. And that's what people want to hire.
That is golden. I love where you went with that. A lot of people are out there chattering, but if you're creating new knowledge, then people will start to tune in a little bit more. Do you also help guide in the work that you do of how do you stay out in front of that? I mean, then that I'm sure gets into the power of persuasion, that you have something that is worth listening to. And I think we all can follow the set of rules, but in my experience, the discipline that you actually do it is the difference of those that show up and those that stand out. And so what we want to share with our audience is, how do we stand out, if that is the one thing, like creating new knowledge? Any ideas of how you stay in that space?
Well, I mean, your discipline comment is so dead on. I think one of the greatest ways to stand out is to be disciplined and just keep doing it. My biggest weakness is that I'm not as disciplined as I should be. It's like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. But it really, I think, two things. One is you have to have a process. The more you can proselytize things to relieve the friction of creation, the better. Secondly, you have to be, I think, just very curious. I find some of my best ideas in the craziest places, and it's just because I'm curious and I ask questions. And thirdly, I think you have to be well read. I remember I had a time period where I kind of really was falling victim to writer's block. Nothing would come. I'd look at the page, nothing. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a prolific content writer, and the first thing he asked me, he goes, well, do you still read?
Mm.
I was like, yeah, I still read. He goes, no, not fiction. Like, do you read like good stuff, like nonfiction, business, etc.? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I am a little. And he's like, well, I don't know how you're having this problem then, because if you're constantly reading good, smart stuff, and you're curious, you're going to connect a point or two. And when you connect those 2 points, that's when a new idea will form. And I think he's right. Once I kind of reinvested myself in making sure I'm reading every day and reading resources that are not my normal resources, I purposely will try to find things that are outside of the echo chamber.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, have the process. Being curious is how I think those people do stand out, those companies stand out. I love being well read and actually going down paths that may not be your everyday because it should spur a thought. In my experience, and would love your thoughts on it, it can sound well and good that you're doing this, but you have to have a process and someone who is owning it, whether it's within your own company or whether you are hiring an agency or whatever that thought leader is. But I would say, from what our conversation is, it needs to be front and center so that you are standing out in the marketplace with your thought leadership that's creating new knowledge, that's gathering interest for your firm. Would that be a good way to summarize that?
It would. And I think one of the ways that I've discovered to do that is I endeavor every year to create at least one really new thought provoking something.
Mm.
Last year, we did research on LinkedIn. We took 6,500 posts from over 150 something agency owners on LinkedIn, and we built this huge data set and we analyzed it. And it was very, very, very hyper specific to people who own small to mid-sized agencies. It took a lot of time to build that one piece of research. But what I find a lot of people will do is they'll say, okay, I have it. They'll do a webinar. Maybe they'll have a breakout or keynote talk. They'll write a white paper. They do it once.
Mhm.
And what we did was something very different. I've got a lot of time invested in this. So we did that webinar probably 10 times over the last year live. And we wouldn't have 50 or 100 people. We'd have 10 or 15. But it was great because we would share the data with 10 or 15 people, and then we'd have a very robust question and answer session, because when there's only 15 people on the Zoom, people are comfortable turning their video on, having a conversation. And it was great. And I think that's the one of the things that I tell people all the time is like, don't just do that webinar one time. Do it 3 times over a 6-week period, and then do it 3 more times. And so that's one of the big things. And it's a discipline thing. Give people more opportunities to run into your content and use that content to leverage opportunities to get speaking gigs, et cetera. And it's very effective. It's a little bit longer term view, but it really helps you get that knowledge out to a broader set of propinquity points where people will discover it who aren't in your natural sphere of influence.
Well, it's a good point. You take the time to create something, do research on it. The one and done doesn't serve anyone. And I love the sometimes smaller, you can have a more engaged experience and just bring it on with the quality wherever it can be. Small is also okay. So that's a really excellent point. I want to switch a little bit to, let's say we have our strategy together, content is good, you're continuing to curate really great stuff. So people are starting to listen to you. But how do you get them to say yes to your ideas or to what you were talking about?
Well, if you're talking in terms of like pitching someone to either, let's say, hire my firm, trying to get them to buy into an idea, my favorite thing to get to do is to teach them how to be more persuasive and get people to say yes. Because we live in a world where Don Draper, kind of ruined it for all of us. Because he was, that quintessential cliche of what we think of when we think of persuasive speakers. You're either born with it and it's just a natural and you just are awesome, or you don't have it and you just don't have it. Like, you can't teach somebody to be persuasive. That's sort of basic mental makeup of most people. And it's just sad because it's not true. When you look at people who are real life Don Drapers and you reverse engineer what they do, all they're doing is what science tells us you naturally should do. They don't know the science. They don't know that they're doing it. They just do it. But once you teach somebody the science and you say, here's the way to break it down, here's the process to go through, you can convert pretty much anybody into a pretty compelling, persuasive individual who is going to get to yes a lot more than no.
So, what's the science? How do we become more persuasive?
Well, I'll just touch on the top 3. The things that people get wrong is the first thing is they don't understand the perception of authority. They believe that when they're presenting There's one presentation happening, it's the one they're giving, and they don't understand there's a second one happening in parallel. And that is inside the audience's mind, where they're trying to figure out if you're even worthy of listening to. Are they going to give themselves permission to be persuaded by you? And that's the first step. Until you give me permission to persuade you, I can't persuade you. That old, you can sell water to a man in the desert. That's not true. At least definitely not in a relationship driven business like professional services, because you got to work with that person afterwards. So the second thing they don't do is they don't think about the architecture of persuasion. I laugh. I say they show up and throw up, and they basically just tell you everything they know about themselves or their idea. And they think if they can just get all of their knowledge into your head, that you're smart, you'll come to the same conclusion they've come to, which is that you should say yes. And they don't take the time to really architect, what do you need to know? What order do you need to know it? How should I walk you through this so that it's really super easy? And if you're doing a formal presentation, it gets even much more complex, because you have cognitive load theory and a lot of stuff in neuroscience that gets in the way of communication. And then lastly, it's just the influence. When we are trying to persuade somebody, we focus so much on the words that we use. And science shows us that the words in between the words are actually as, if not more important, and that the way in which you deliver things like hesitancy, things like hedging, just little words that we naturally insert into our language, destroy your persuasiveness and destroy your authority and credibility with your audience. And so once you get people to understand the science and teach it to them, and then they start to develop it as muscle memory, it's amazing how much more persuasive they can be. It's amazing how many more times they will get a client to say yes and hire their firm for the exact same product that they were selling 6 months ago, that they couldn't get anybody to say yes, just by changing the way they present the information.
I agree 100% there. The words in between the words, that's such a fascinating. Is it more the nonverbal that's coming through? Are they literally words in between what you think are the big words?
It can be both. In the case of hesitancy, it's actually the words. Human beings hate silence, especially during a conversation. If I'm talking and I stop, you pick up that I'm done, that's your signal for it's your turn, you'll start talking. And if you don't start talking after so many seconds, I will become uncomfortable and I'll start talking some more. And when we're presenting, we don't like silence because we think it makes us look stupid. But inevitably, when you present, your mouth and your brain get out of sync. And what do? You go, the little filler words. There's some really fascinating science around how when you use filler words, it reduces your credibility, and your title doesn't save you. You can be the CEO, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be thought of as less credible by the audience, because we associate hesitancy words with lack of topical superior expertness, topical authority, etc. And we all do it. It's just human nature. But if we can train somebody out of that to where they take away those hesitancy words if their language, it's amazing just how much more persuasive they are and how much more in command they seem.
I was listening to a presentation not too long ago, and this is brilliant person speaking, certainly experienced and quite good at the role. But in explaining the position, I started counting after about the fourth and then I was fixated on the ums, and I was doing hash marks on it. I never even heard what was being said, but I think there were like 250 ums in that presentation.
Yep.
Is that a good example of you lose your sense for persuasion with filler words that don't elevate you, even though this person has a very substantial title?
Well, it sounds like you're struggling for the next word. And you might be, not because you don't know the next word. It's just, again, your brain and your mouth get out of sync. It happens to all of us. The only difference is some of us have trained ourselves not to say the because all the does is draw more attention to the fact that you're out of sync and that you're maybe, for whatever reason, struggling for the next word. And a lot of times it's just because someone's trying to rephrase something in a way that's going to make sense to you. You see this a lot with people who are really, really brilliant and they're used to speaking about a topic at this level, but now they're talking to you and you're at this level and they're, for lack of a better term, they're trying to dumb it down and they will struggle because that's not how they're used to talking about it. And they'll get a lot of ums and ers. And that's the big thing, is just being able to teach somebody how to do that without the ums and ers. Like I said, it just makes a lot of difference. The fascinating study I love the most was a 3-minute audio script. One was perfect. One had either 5 or 7 ums, which, I mean, that's not a lot of ums for your little hashtag exercise. But it was enough within 3 minutes that it created a difference. It didn't matter if they were testing students and they told them it was either a TA or the professor. It didn't matter if it was the professor or the TA. If they had the ums, that was the version that was judged less credible. And that's what I mean when I say your title doesn't save you. And so in some cases it is nonverbal. In some cases it's just tone, but there are a lot of times where there are actual words that come out of your mouth that are just destroying your credibility. And if you just learn to not use them, you instantly become smarter and more persuasive.
Well, I love the science of that. I love the precision of that. And I probably harp on it a lot within our own team. And luckily, we believe in candor with care. And if we're going to be stronger the next time someone presents, but I will routinely ask my team to record yourself. And then I may say to someone, go back and listen. How many ums did you have? Go back and listen. And I have this huge issue with, we're sort of doing this. We're kind of doing this. Well, are you doing it or not? And they will smile at me. But that's another one that I don't think will elevate the authority side in your presentation, whatever you are selling or hoping to accomplish and wanting them to say yes to. So I don't want to go too far down that, but my own suggestion for firms is don't just sweep it off to the side, but invest both the time, the energy, bring talent in to help your people who speak the most. And if you're a team, let's use the construction industry. Yeah, there may be someone who on the job site, his role isn't to be the authority speaker. It's okay because you may give him or her the benefit of the doubt. But someone needs to be able to smooth those edges and make sure the words in between the words give a sense of power, authority, and ultimately persuasion that you're the right choice for fill in the blank. Would you add anything to that?
Only that you're absolutely right on the hedge word. They call it a hedge word, by the way. And it does, same as the hesitancy words, it does destroy. And I think the stat is like 78% of CEOs of companies will tell you that the ability to speak persuasively is the number one most linked characteristic to great leaders. And I agree. I think you look in the field of business, you look in the field of politics, places that are both very persuasion oriented. The great orators tend to do really well in those places. And it's because it's just a great power. It's an unusual power. Most people are not very good at persuasive speaking. They're not very good at public speaking because it scares the bejesus out of them. So if you can, especially as a younger member of a team, if you can be that person who can speak authoritatively, and I think especially if you're young and you can speak to older folks that are 5, 10, 20 years your senior, and you can present and really come across as confident, I think it's even doubly impressive because I think everybody goes, wow, I wish I could have done that at 30.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I have a 17-year-old son about to be 18, and we did a thing for Leukemia Society to raise money. And so I did a big learning session on this topic for people. And then whatever you paid to get in, we gave that money to Leukemia Society. And at the end, I made him come out and thank the sponsors and the people. And so here he is, a little 17-year-old kid steps up on stage in front of 150 people, and he starts just firing it off. And he's just killing it. And I cannot tell you how many people came up to me and said, gosh, I cannot believe how well spoken your son is. That was amazing. Great compliment, right? But that's what I mean. It was amazing because he was 17. If I had walked up on the stage and done exactly what he did, nobody would have said too much about it. It'd been like, well, of course, you're a public speaker, you're supposed to be able to do that. But to watch a 17-year-old kid do it, and that's going to be a skill set that helps him in the future. It's going to make him more persuasive. It's going to make him more bankable, more hireable, all the way around. So it's just, I just think it's a fabulous skill for everyone to learn. So it's, like I said, that's why it's probably the most fun I get to have with agencies, is helping them improve their employees' team's ability to just present persuasively, sell their ideas, get more campaigns approved.
I think that is powerful. And most of the time, when there are issues, one way or the other, it comes back down to communication. And did we do that well? And it's a word we use all the time, but you cannot overemphasize and state it. And I actually speaking at my alma mater tonight to how do you do things better? What advice would you give? And I'm pretty sure I'm going to add that one. I never realized the power of communication until I saw the power of communications.
Yeah.
We talked about the words that can give you less of that authoritative position. Are there any phrases or anything that makes you stand out, that gives you a more influential approach other than just doing it well? Does anything come to mind?
I don't know of any phrases that by default make you more persuasive. For instance, if you're presenting data or support statistics, research, things of that nature, if you present it in the present tense versus the past tense, it'll be more persuasive.
Hmm,
It sounds silly, but it works.
that's
And it's
interesting.
all because of the way your brain processes. Because when you say something, well, it showed, or that, this research showed, or consumers have said, your brain hears that endpoint, and your brain's wired to think no first before yes. And so what it does is it kind of like that people say, well, we sort of, or we kind of, you're just giving the human brain permission to say no. You just opened a door for it to walk through, and it will walk through that door first. So I think that you might be able to say that. But really, what it comes down to is it's just a combination of factors that all really lead back to confidence. And if you really appear confident in what you're saying, there's just no way in heck you can be wrong. That is probably the single most important factor. Now, you can go too confident. You can get to that point where you kind of cross over people going, you're a little full of yourself. And then that's it, you lose them. But there's that sweet spot in the middle. And if you can get into that groove, it's amazing how much more effective you can be and how much more willing people are to say yes. Because when you're trying to persuade somebody, you're ultimately asking them to take on a risk. At a minimum, it's reputational. At a maximum, it could be their job, especially in marketing. We all know the stories of people who got fired for hiring the wrong agency or greenlighting the wrong campaign. And when you think about that, that comes down to, I trust you. I think you're super credible. I have confidence in your confidence. I mean, that's what you're really doing. You're kind of selling a feeling to some extent. When you can get that, that's how you can get people to say, okay, the risk isn't zero here, but it feels pretty close to zero. And now I can say yes.
Everything's AI. Is there anything else to talk about? But are you seeing AI be a tool for the business development side, for the presenter side, and any suggestions for tools that we should be employing with our teams?
It surely is a major factor, but I think the bigger factor is not so much the tools to employ, but understanding how people looking to hire speakers or people looking to hire agencies are using the tools. The premise of the invisible sale was that the technology had allowed for two types of prospects: those you could see, the people that you were proactively going after, and then the people who looked just like the people you were going after, that were in the market for what you sell that you didn't even know existed. And all of a sudden, technology had made it so they could find you. You didn't have to find them. So who you knew became less important than who knew you, right? That was the whole premise behind the invisible sale. I really want to go back to the publisher and say, we need to reissue a new version of the invisible sale and update it for AI, because AI just took that concept and put it on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what AI does. If you say, I need a keynote speaker who's a master at sales and business development for ad agencies, AI is going to go out and do that search, and it's going to bring back 3 to 5 names. If you're not one of those 3 to 5 names, you're probably not getting called. That's a whole new ball game. And that's a ball game based on knowledge, people, spreading your knowledge around, people referencing your knowledge, people telling you, being on someone's podcast and having that reference you a certain way, etc. That's the power of AI for business development today, is understanding, how do I make sure my content's getting found by AI? How do I make sure AI knows my content is mine, regardless of where it appears? And how do I make sure that AI really understands my content versus letting AI interpret my content, so that I come up in the right places? And I've already started to see it. I'll have inbounds and my forms will tell me where the source was, and it'll say ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, and it's like, wow. And I think that's the thing for in the business development world. That is the whole concept of propinquity points, the whole concept of spreading your knowledge around the world, where people can stumble on it and find you. AI just threw that whole process onto steroids.
As we're coming up on the end of this, I want to put a little bit of a wrapper around what I heard. Certainly, strategy is important as we look at ways to invite people in to learn about our business, whatever that business might be. I heard you say at a pretty high level, there has to be a process to how you do this. So, for those listening, make sure the process is there. Make sure you're not just running out the door to fill in the blanks, say something because you've got a human being that might listen, but make sure there is a process. And if you don't own it internally, then find out who will be assisting you to guide that, and tell everyone, until it's the muscle memory is there that you're doing it better than anyone else. Remain curious. That was a continue to be well read, because you said you got to do the next version of your book because AI is changing everything until the next thing is changing. Is there anything that we should know, encouraging us to read your book, to be successful and to stand out when it comes to being a pretty phenomenal salesperson? You want to make sure they're reminded of what?
You want to make sure that people are reminded of the way you made them feel when they were dealing with you. And did you make them feel heard, understood? You saw them not as a type, but as an individual, or an individual organization or a business that has its unique problems, and that you really understand their problem. I think that's the most important thing, because if you can get that, there'll be a lot of people that'll have a solution for their problem, but most people won't really take the time to get to know their problem. They'll just say, oh, you're this type of company, you have these kinds of problems, this is how we solve those. And I think that's completely forgettable. The really unique people are the ones that sit and listen quietly and probe and ask the unique question, ask the question that no one else is asking. And that's when someone goes, ooh, that was interesting. No one's ever asked me that. Like, that's how you stand out as a salesperson or a BD person.
Yeah, I remember sharing with someone that when I learned to stop trying to have all the answers, but just ask better questions and listen, because I have two ears versus the one mouth, I felt my credibility improved because I didn't try to dominate the conversation. And it's part of the process, but younger people just grab onto that because it's not too soon to begin that process. Like your 17-year-old son, when you stand out differently from others in your age group, you will build your own credibility there. So I love the thought around that. And at the end of the day, the experience of how you make people feel, AI is not going to solve that. You can hang out with a bot all day,
Yep.
but it's not real. And we want to have the real interactions winning the day always. Don't ever want that to change.
Totally agree.
I have one final question for you. I ask this each time. What do you do, Tom, to keep bettering your best?
Well, in addition to just constantly being curious and having the benefit of being intellectually ADD, I never accept that my best is my best. I believe that whatever I've done can always be better. There's some little way I could incrementally make it just a tad better. And as long as you never think that you've reached the finish line, it's easy to keep running the race.
Beautiful. Love that thought process. In the research we did for the book, there are three attitudinal mindsets. You're satisfied, so yeah, I'm already at the best. Those who simplify, I mean, let's just not go through all of it. Just give me the three things I need to do, because who cares about the other? And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because there's a beauty for simplification, but the aspiring, you never get there because there's always a way to keep bettering your best, which is why I asked the question, because I have that disease. It's like, okay, well, I did that. Well, thank you for team that just got us to that line. Now what's next? And that can be fatigue for some, but for me, it's energizing. It sounds like it is for you too.
Yeah. Well, goal oriented people tend to always need a goal.
We will have show notes, including how to get in touch with you, ways to get your book, and any final parting words for us as we wrap up.
The only thing I always tell people is, especially as it relates to business development or growing a business or anything that you're trying to do in the world, is never ever confuse activity with progress. They're different.
Thank you so much. You have a lot of wisdom, and I hope to bring you back soon when you've got the second version, including AI, in your book.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for being part of our best-in-class community. And until next time, keep bettering your best.